All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to be talking about the Black Death or the bubonic plague. We're going to go over how many people it killed and basically its effect on the world. Okay, but first, let's look at the objective. We're going to analyze how the Black Death started, and then we're going to examine how and why the Black Death spread so quickly. All right. We're going to create an argument on what is the best thing to do in a pandemic slash plague. Okay, you're going to see what these people did back then and what worked, what didn't work. And basically, it kind of relates to what's going on right now with the whole COVID. Okay. So we're going to be looking at that kind of stuff. Let's start off again with the warm up. Okay. So first question asks you, what are three things you see in this picture? Okay, so look at the whole picture, look at the foreground, the background, look at every person. Okay. Um, so that's one. The second picture is, or second question is, what do you think is going on in this picture? Okay, based off what you see, and again, look at everything and look at everyone. Um, and what do you think is going on? Okay, so if you're still writing, continue to write, pause the video, but we're moving on to the notes in 3, 2, 1. All right, so the Black Death, or was known as the Great Mortality, swept through the world. Now, it didn't go like 1 year, 2 years. It stretched for almost 10 years. And where it hit different spots at different times. Now, the another name for it is the bubonic plague. Okay, the reason why it was called the Black Death is one of the symptoms. Okay, first off, it started with like swollen lymph glands, which is over here. You had boils. Now, if any guys have ever seen that cartoon Fairly Odd Parents, there's a little boy who had a boil on his face and would sometimes like talk and things like that. But imagine that, but all over your body, right? Pockets of basically pus filled with blood and just nastiness, pure nastiness, right? Imagine that all over your body, and sometimes they would burst. So another thing: fever, chills, headaches, shortness of shortness of breath, hemorrhaging, internal hemorrhaging, and vomiting. Okay, and the thing is, it was called the Black Death also because people's fingers and their toes and parts of their arms, parts that were dying or dead, would turn black. So that's how you could tell someone had it, or their how quickly it was spreading or throughout their body because their body parts would turn black. Now the survival rate, it differed anywhere from 30 to 50%. That's the survival rate. That's how much a percentage of you would survive if you were untreated. You know. Now the thing is, it did start in Asia. Okay, but the bubonic plague, it was around back in the BC times. But the thing is, the strain on this year, or I should say, this strain at this time, it kind of mutated to where it could sustain longer, and it basically went throughout the known world at that time. Okay, because again, you have to remember at this time, nobody knew about what was going on in the North American continent and South American continent. Uh, Now the thing is, like I said, it started off in Asia, right? And now the Mongols were going to attack this place called Kaffa. Now Kaffa is a port city where trade happens and things like that. Well, the Mongols came in, the place, they boarded up their walls and things like that. Um, and the Mongols were attacking for about a year. Then what happened is some of the Mongol soldiers started getting the plague and they died. So what the Mongols did was take these bodies, the dead bodies full of the bubonic plague, put them on catapults and shot them over the walls into the city of Kaffa. Now imagine this: dead bodies full of the boils and pus and things like that, flinging through the air and then hitting tops of houses, trees, just straight hitting the ground, and all those boils all over the body, just squirting everywhere. As you guys know, disease spreads that way, right? Especially if it gets in the water system and things like that. So you can just imagine these people seeing dead bodies being flung into their town, and this pus and things like that just spilling everywhere. Um, Now, the thing is, some of those people, they stayed inside, trying to keep away from it. Other people got on the ships because remember, Kaffa is a port city where ships come in. Got on ships and they left to other places. And if you look on the map, the area where it says like no data, which is in white, if you look a little to the right, you'll see is the town Kaffa, right? Spelled with the K on this one. Um, there you can see how they went from there down and then it just spread there. Okay, so here you go. Here's the first question to you. What are your thoughts on the Mongols using dead bodies as weapons? Do you think that was smart? Do you think that was like, yeah, that's somebody's, one of their soldiers, they should like bury them and things like that, honor their comrades, death? Or do you think that's like, that's a smart move? What do you think? So be sure you write your response on that. The second question is, what do you think is going to happen to the people who escaped Kaffa on ships? Do you think these guys are going to survive? Do you think that some of them had the plague? Do you think some of them? Do you think they didn't? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that they're going to be mourning people? I mean, just whatever you can think of. Tell me what you think. What's going to happen to these people? Okay, so go ahead, pause the video, write your responses. Well, we're going to be moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So the people who left Kaffa, they went to several ports. One of the most, um, one of the places that they really went to was a place called Constantinople. Now, at Constantinople, when those people came in, there were people who had the plague, and they died, and they spread the plague. 90% of the population of Constantinople died. So just imagine this: out of 10 people, 9 of them died. Okay. So that'd be like if you could just imagine 10 people in a room, 9 of them would be dead. All right. It was pretty bad. It actually, it's very, very bad. Um, Now Sicily, their population, they took in some people. Their population died. It's one of 3 people. For every 3 people, one of them died. Now, other Italian cities, they took in people that came in through boats, and those boats, again, were carrying the plague. Okay, and the population died. Anywhere from 50 to 60% died. Um, Later on, there was little ships going to England and Germany, and basically little towns full of people who knew each other. They got together, things like that. Totally wiped out. A town completely dead from the plague because again, people were close together. People they knew each other, and because how quickly the plague could spread, wiped out entire towns. All right. Now, first thing, as you guys may or may not know, people are panicking. Okay, and when people are panicking, they tend to think irrationally, and so they look for someone to blame. They're like, who could do this? What is causing this? And immediately people start looking at the Jewish people and saying, "You're the reason. You're the reason why this is all happening." And they start massacring them. They start killing them off. Now, the thing is, some Jewish people actually fought back. And then these people who didn't like the Jewish people were like, oh, "Look at, see, they're guilty. They're trying to fight back. See, they're guilty. They're the ones who spread this." And they start attacking them, saying, it's a punishment by God. And again, you have to remember, the Jewish faith, they do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So a lot of these Christian Catholic groups started attacking them for that, saying, "Hey, you guys are the ones who did this. You guys are the blame for it. You're the punishment that we're suffering because of you." That kind of mentality. Okay. Now, some people who lived at the port cities, a city where the ships came in, near the ocean, near the water, um, a lot of those people started getting scared because the plague is now in their town. So what they did is they moved out. They went more inwards into the country as opposed to where their home was, which is near the water. They came inward. And the thing is, not everybody who came inward was basically um, like plague free. Some of the people who came in had the plague, they just didn't know it yet. Okay. And what happened was this: on October 1348, King Edward um, the Third of England, his daughter dies of the plague. Now the thing is, he moved his family to the countryside. But along with the countryside, when they went, they brought their servants and things like that. Now, nobody knows exactly how she got the plague. Some thinks it was her servants, because again, they didn't always live in the castle, so that sometimes they came out, they went to the store and things like that. Um, some things it was probably think it was like maybe one of the servants bought some blankets or some clothing, things like that, and then the plague was on it, and um, the little girl got it. But either way, she got it, she died, and this was a heartbreaker for King Edward III. The thing is, King Edward basically looked around and goes, "You know what? I think I know why things are so bad." He goes, "Because look at in London, they throw their garbage out in the street. Um, People dump their waste. Because back in then, you have to remember they didn't really have plumbing. So what they would do is they would do their business in a bucket, and if they were in a building, sometimes they open their windows and toss that puppy out. You know, so there would be human waste in the roads and back roads and things like that. Um, and in the river, the Thames rivers, it was basically used as a sewer well. Now it's water, it's beautiful water, things like that. But back in the day, it was basically a sewer line. And he's saying, look at all this garbage, all this filth. It's This is the reason why the plague is spreading. He's right, but he's not right. That's not the reason why the plague's spreading. But it also isn't helping things. The cleaning, the hygienic thing. Yeah, he's right on that part. But the human feces and all that stuff on the ground, things like that, it didn't spread the plague. It just didn't make things better. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, so here's the first question. Do you think if the king's daughter had not died from the plague, that he would even care about the plague? Do you think that because his daughter died, that's when you start thinking, maybe it's because all this filth and things like that? This is why the plague is spreading. Do you think it's because she died, that's why you start thinking of it? Or do you think that if she hadn't died, that he wouldn't have thought about it at all? So what do you think? All right. The second one is, do you think the port's people, who were living near the water when the ships were coming in, do you think they were selfish for trying to flee the plague? Why not? Again, just because you got the plague doesn't mean you get the symptoms instantaneously. You could have it and you don't know it yet. It might take days, weeks, who knows? But the thing is, if you have it, eventually it was going to come out. So some of these people didn't know they probably had it. Do you think it was selfish of them to leave and try to find, um, you know, a place to be safe, or do you think that they should have stayed home, stayed in their city? That way the plague doesn't spread, either by them or anyone else. So what do you think? All right. So go ahead, pause the video, write your response. But we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So Scotland is under English rule. and they see what's happening in England. They're like, you know what? We can gain our freedom here. So what they do is they basically say, we're going to go attack England right now when they're at their weakest. You know, people are dying, things like that. This is the time to attack where we can get our freedom. Bam. Okay. Here's the problem. Scotland had no symptoms, no cases whatsoever. They were they were plague free. But when the Scotland soldiers went to the border between Scotland and England, some of the soldiers got sick and they started again having the vomits and things like that. And so then their leader said, you know what? No, we're gonna cancel the attack. So they canceled the attack and went back home. The soldiers are sick. They went from being free of any plague to now coming back home with people with the plague. So obviously, I don't have to explain anymore what happens. I'm sure you can get the hint. Now, here's how the disease spread because people were just like, how does this work? And how's this working? Is it because of the Jewish people? Is it because of, um, the feces and stuff of that in the ground and stuff of that? It was the fleas on rats. The fleas were the carriers. Okay. Now the thing is, the rats get the blame for it, which again, the rats, yeah, they did um, have the plague, but they weren't the ones who were spreading it really. They carried it and moved it around, but it was the fleas on the rats that spread it. And the thing is, nowadays, when you get bit by a flea, you would be like, "Oh my God, what the heck was that? Get off!" Things like that, because it's not common for people nowadays to get bit by fleas if they have no animals near them. But back at this time, it was common. People didn't wash all the time. The stuff they wore, the animals would be near them, things like that. So fleas and bites and things like that were common. They're kind of like, something bit me. Probably a flea. They thought nothing of it. Okay. Um, Now, the thing is, early on, when people died, there would be people going by and they would see, hey, somebody died and they had this nice coat or this blanket and some of that. So they would take it because these dead people don't need it. So they would take it off the dead people, whether it's clothes, blankets, money, didn't matter. They took it, and sometimes the people they either carried it for themselves or they sold it. And again, washing it, cleaning it was not the top priority. It was making money or having something to keep them warm, things like that. Years later, it would spread, you know, through air, through cough, things like that, fluid exchanges, type of thing. But the thing is, too, bodies were left. People started realizing what was happening. So then they see a dead body on the ground. They left it alone. They didn't want to be anywhere near it. So people had clothes on, let it be. They had money in their hand, their pocket, not touching it, you know. And basically, people turned their backs on their own relationships. People would be like, "Mom and Dad is sick, dying from the plague. We're at the we're at the bounce." You know, uh, my wife is dying. I'm going to take the kids and leave because I don't want to get the kids sick. So people would leave their loved ones there dying, and try to flee. Bodies were taken. You know, people were being paid to round up bodies, burn them, things like that. So yeah, trade went. I mean, basically shut down. Um, because again, people wonder, oh, is this person sick? Is the stuff they're selling me have the plague on it? So people were very cautious when it came to trade, and it basically came to a standstill. Now, remember I told you several weeks ago, the peasants had nothing. They're dirt poor. All they had was their soul and their minds. And their minds, they didn't learn much. They weren't taught much. But their soul is something that they had. And this is where things got really bad because they looked to the church. They looked to the church for salvation. And the church turned their backs on them. Before people die, they're given their last rites. That way, when they go to heaven, their soul will be cleansed and things like that. They're heard, the last confession is heard, so that everything's off their soul. So when they pass away, they can go on to heaven with a clean slate. But that's the thing, the church did not do that. As soon as people start coughing and this and that, like, oh my God, I need my last rites. I know I'm gonna die soon. Or try to get a priest to go see someone's dying mother or things like that. The priest would deny them. They denied people their last rites. They denied them going to church. Um, any type of blessing, the priest comes and do stuff like that. None of that. Not even from a distance. You know, their confessions being heard, stuff like that, being denied. So a lot of these peasants felt like they were basically condemned to hell by the church because their confessions weren't being heard. They weren't given that last rites. So they have a bad taste for the church, and you're going to have some repercussions because of that. All right, now here's my question to you, and this is I really want you to think about this one. Would you stay and help your best friend if they had the plague? Okay, now I know the easy answer is to be like, oh yeah, I would stay, but remember, you had either a 50 to 30% chance of survival. And if you got it and you went back home, you would be spreading the plague to your family, to your loved ones, and things like that. It's a gamble. And the thing is, like I said, you wouldn't get the symptoms like that. Sometimes it would take days, you know. So really think about it. Would you help your best friend? Yes or no, and why? All right. Here's the other question: is if you heard a group who might be carriers of a plague are coming to your town, what would you do? So let's say you're in Fresno and you hear something on social media saying a group from, like, let's say Selma is coming over, and they need help. Their whole town has basically died. These people are coming to Fresno for help. What you think might happen? What would you guys do? Your fellow Fresno citizens, things like that. Uh, what would you do? Would you help them? Would you refuse them? Would you put them at a certain part of Fresno? I mean, what would you do? Okay. So continue writing, but we're moving on in three, two, one. So the church was basically seen as like, hey, they're not helping us. Some people start feeling kind of powerless, like, my God, God's not on our side. So what do we do? They kind of felt really defenseless in a sense. So some people started seeing as like, you know what? We need to take care of this on our own. We need to do something. We can't rely on the church. They're denying us. So we need to do something. So what happened is there's some people, they're called flagellants. And what they do is they tend to do the punishment that Jesus suffered by the Romans. And one of the things they do is they get these whips and they hit themselves in the back. These whips would be like thick leather. They'd be tied up. You have like little, bundles all, tied up. And at the ends, they would have these little nails, little thorns, things like that. And when they hit their back, they sometimes rip off some part of their skin, or they hit it so much that the skin got loose, and then it would get to the bare back, and then you get the muscle and things like that. So you get blood, and some of that be flinging. Um, they did this for 33 and a half days. And there were some groups as large as 1,000 people who would be marching down the street, hitting themselves with these whips, and suffering again like the punishment Jesus suffered. Now, here's the thing. While these people are walking through the street, there'd be people on the side watching them. And when this blood, again, from their back would fling off, some people got blood on their face, on their chest and things like that. And what they would do is spread it on their face, because the way they saw it was that that blood was in a sense holy, because these guys are doing the same punishment that Jesus had. So ergo, that blood must be holy because it's all self-sacrifice and things like that. So they would spread it on themselves. Okay. 1351, an idea comes up of, you know what? Maybe we should quarantine ourselves. Don't be too close with everyone else. Stick to your own place, your own home. Um, you know, grow your own food. Don't really trade, type of thing. And the thing is, it actually showed that, hey, the plague actually slowed down. It didn't spread as fast. So, oh, maybe this quarantine thing does work. Now, here's the thing: the plague eventually, the whole um, large amount of deaths, it started to really go down and dwindle. Um, Now, when it got to the end in like 1353, 1354, somewhere around there, um, there was some silver lining. There was some good news to all these deaths, because people just looked at the number like, oh, this is so horrible. But there were some good things that happened to the survivors. For one, there was really now less workers. Now, because there was little workers, every place, factory and stores, they need people to work. So now they're fighting for who's going to work here. So they paid more, because now this factory needs workers. This place needs some workers. So instead of paying them dirt little, slave wages type of thing, they had now were fighting to see how many workers they can get. So the lower man, who was making little to nothing, was now able to find a job where they were going to pay him good money. Now there was plenty of food. With 2/3 of the world basically dead, now there was plenty of food to go around. Prices on things dropped, because now it wasn't like, oh, we built this, we made this, now we can sell to the highest bidder. Now it's more like, who wants this? Who wants this vase? It cost $1,000 before. I'll make it $500. Nobody buy 200. I mean something. They want some money. So prices. Another thing that dropped was rent. Because again, 2/3 of the people dead. Um, Now these places are empty. These rooms, these apartments, these little cottages and homes, they're empty. So we need to have people live there because those people want money. So they're, hey, I'll lower the rent. I'll lower the rent from let's say $100 to $50. No, still too expensive. Oh, you heard this guy will do it for $40? I'll make it 35. So things did work out for the people who survived. The people who died, sadly they died. So here are some pictures of, so if you look to the right, those are some people who still do the flagellants today. They still do that to this day. Still hit themselves with the whips. Here's a picture of the ones with the thorns and stuff like that. This is a common one nowadays. The one to your left, as you can see the knot there, that once it hits, it does kind of, after so many times, it does tear through the skin, as you can see from the picture here on the right. So here's the last question. What do you think is more crazier? The flagellants, the people who were hitting themselves with the whips, or the people who watched and basically spread the blood all over their face while there's a disease going around? Who do you think is more crazier? And why? Why do you think that group is, in a sense, crazier than the other group? Okay, so go ahead and write this down. Um, but pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, now we come to the exit ticket. So again, pick one of these three questions. How did the Black Death start to really spread? So how did it really spread? When did it really spread? Second one, why did the Black Death spread so quickly in Europe? Why did it spread so, rapidly fast and hard hitting in Europe? And the last one is, what is the best thing for people to do in a pandemic slash plague? What steps should they do? Okay. Based off what you've learned today, what you've heard about the COVID and stuff like that, what is the best thing for people to do? Okay. So go ahead, pick one, write down your response. Um, but that's it for this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you um, got to learn something that really was an eye opener for you. Okay. So that's it. You guys have a good day. Take care. Be safe.